All right. Hello and welcome, Just a Family. This is giving you something to talk about, or Just a Live TV, as I like to call it. I'm your host, Melissa Krechler. I am an identity coach, spiritual teacher, business mentor, creator, and founder of not only Just a Live TV, but also the Women Supporting Women CAN Network. Today, we're going to be talking about toxic relationships and what those mean, what they feel like, and really how to create healthy relationships. So, we're going to be getting into that in a moment. Today's sponsor is a Phoenix Identity. Go and click the link to get their 7 ways you may be damaging your relationships. This goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. Very important to take acknowledgement and ownership for the way that we are in our relationships. So go and download that guide, and that will actually help you figure out a few things that you may be doing to cause a lot of tension in your relationships. So go and check that out. Download it. Link in the description. If you would like to get a hold of myself or my guest speaker today, go please and check out links in the description. You can reach us at any time, comment, engage, and let's get started. Melissa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Melissa Hart. There's 2 Melissas with you this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a coach and a speaker, and my mission is to help women who feel lost and overwhelmed by life's changes to find clarity and build confidence so they can step bravely into the next chapter of their lives. So I'm really excited to be here this morning.
Well, thank you for joining me. So today, again, we're talking about toxic relationships, and one of the points you had made before we started this recording was that the language that we use, and I wanted to bring that up,
Yeah.
and I want you to explain the what led to that conversation. We were originally going to title this toxic,
Yeah.
how to deal with toxic individuals, right? And you made a very valid point, so I want you to share that point.
I think something that I'm really interested in talking about right now in today's culture and society is how incredibly divisive everything is. And are there ways in which we can contribute positively to bringing more unity? And I think that the language that we use about ourselves and about other people can either cause us to draw closer together or to have more division. And so, to aside from the fact that that's a toxic person is a generally negative way of speaking, and that's a whole nother conversation about the science behind what happens when we allow negativity to come out of our mouths. When we label people in that way, we're creating distance between us and them. There's judgment, there's an othering, and what's missing is understanding that at the end of the day, this is one of my personal core beliefs, we're all doing the best we can with the skills and resources available to us. And hurt people hurt people. And when we have more of a compassionate, loving understanding of other people and their motivations and behavior, I think that allows us to feel a little more connected to our neighbors. But what that doesn't necessitate is that we stay in close relationship with that person, right? 2 things can be true. We can understand and have loving compassion for where they're at and their struggles and their childhoods and their trauma and how that might be coming out in harmful and toxic behavior. And we can also choose to say, I don't want that energy in my life, but I do think that it's important to be careful about the language that we use.
Majority of my friendships and even family relationships that have ended, we're specifically talking about the ones that have ended for a
Mm-hmm.
second, is, majority of them I've let them go with love. I have had multiple friendships where I've sat down and I said, you know what, I'm not okay in this relationship anymore. I'm not putting it on you. I'm not saying you're the cause. I'm not comfortable in this relationship anymore. I need to take a step back and walk away.
Yeah.
And it's because in the long scheme of things, what people don't realize is that when we're triggered, when we feel like somebody's behavior, words, or actions, or even beliefs are toxic, that's our perception of that, right?
Yeah.
I've said this 100 times and I'll say it 100 more. If Melissa turned around and said and called me a bitch, and I'm going to curse for a second, I'd be like, okay, your point. Yeah, like I am. I know I am, and I'm okay with that. But if I reverse that, right? And if I said, "Oh my God, hi Melissa, hi bitch, how's it going?" Right? If you didn't like being called that, right? Am I at fault for calling you that when it doesn't matter to me? No, I'm not, right? Because I don't know that it's an issue for you. And I'm going to jump that in for one of the ways that we find relationships toxic is our perception of things, right?
Yeah.
If somebody says, does, or behaves a certain way that you don't like, you're the one who doesn't like it. Now, I'm not condoning their behavior. If their behavior is validly toxic, morally, lawfully toxic, then absolutely. But at the same time, you need to vocalize that, right?
Well, and I think that's how you differentiate between healthy and toxic is, can you have that conversation? Is the person on the other side from you able to have that kind of conversation and receive your words about, this hurt me and I'll tell you why? And the difference between healthy and toxic is the ability to even have that, I think, is one of the markers you can use.
Yeah. I have 4 kids, and one of the things I say to my own children is, if they've done something stupid, and trust their kids, right? If I do something stupid, I say, that wasn't very smart, and you're a smart person, but your behavior wasn't smart, right? And it's realizing the difference that people aren't their behaviors. People aren't their beliefs. People,
Right.
as an identity coach and a mental health and emotional health expert, we are not the way we express ourselves. Not now, not in society these days.
Yeah.
We are how, we are our passions. We are our core identity. What I say to people isn't always going to be who I am. And your perception of that is totally different. So if you perceive that somebody's actions, thoughts, or beliefs, or even words are toxic, being able to have that conversation and know that you're the one that finds it toxic. And when you have that conversation, it's not putting it on the other person. It's, hey, I don't know if you know, but I find that word really offensive. And, I'm no issue, but I do find it offensive. And can you try not to just say it around me? Right. And we need to respect that of people. Right. And if the
Yeah.
person is non-toxic or in a non-toxic
Yeah.
behavior, they're gonna hear you. But you can't expect people to change a toxic behavior or a toxic word if you don't communicate that you find issue with it.
And I think what you're talking about is unpopular these days, because I think what's popular is to just rage about this toxic group or person or political thing, and just you get praised for cutting them off or saying all these negative things. Like that feeds, like whatever that is, whatever that psychology term is, that feeds
Positivity
our,
movement.
yeah, whatever that feeds our brains when we see that headline or we see that video where that person's raging. It's really popular to kind of point the finger the other way. And I think what you and I are interested in really dialing down into is, okay, well, where's the self-responsibility? Like, if we just continue to do that, we're just going to continue to spiral and have complete separation between ourselves and others. And so this piece of being able to own our part of it and communicate clearly, how does that other person know that they're hurting you if you're not communicating it? And if we also have this belief that everyone's doing the best that they can, and that I think most people are not waking up in the morning thinking, how many people can I harm today with my words? Maybe some are, we can have that conversation, but I don't think most people are. I think most people are doing the best they can to be loved and accepted and welcomed and belong. But the problem is that kind of attitude and mentality and way of speaking doesn't get you the clicks and the likes. And so it's not as valued, I think, right now.
Yeah. I have the perfect example of that from this weekend, actually, or Monday, I should say. So I'm in Canada. I'm in central Canada. And we are absolutely diverse in Canada. We have many different cultures, many different nationalities. So Diwali was actually Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And from Thursday evening to Monday evening, we had fireworks constantly. Every evening we had fireworks, and I'm nothing against the fireworks, nothing against the celebration. I was all for it until it went on until after 2 in the morning.
Oh dear. Yeah.
And so the people in my area, or we on Facebook, we have a residents group on Facebook, for anybody to join that's in our local area, right? And there was post after post after post about, this is disrespectful. I understand that it's a holiday. I understand it's the Festival of Lights and, everything that's going on with this holiday. And that's great, right? And I even commented and I said, I have no issue. It doesn't matter gender, race, culture. I don't care about any of that. If you want to light fireworks on your holidays, light fireworks on your holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Not a problem, but not after midnight. Not after midnight. My entire family was up until after 3 a.m. that on Monday. Nobody went to work. Nobody went to school Tuesday because we were so exhausted.
Yeah.
Because every few minutes we had fireworks going off. And put that aside, all of these posts on Facebook, and anybody who complained on Facebook were targeted by a handful of people saying that it was racist, that we were complaining because of the fireworks, that it's once a year, get over it. It's one night out of 365 days, not realizing that for some of us, it was actually day 5 already. And, not knowing that Diwali is actually a 5 to 6 day event.
Yeah.
And that's society though. That's social media culture to attack and to perceive things that aren't there. We weren't being toxic for saying, hey, no,
because they get the kudos to you. Oh, look, you're so whatever woke, whatever language you want to use. Oh, you're so woke for recognizing racism, right? And so there's this like validation or approval or kudos that they get by doing that. And that's what I mean. There's this weird feedback loop that is increasing people's, desire to kind of post and call out and, kind of come down on completely reasonable feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And that is society. There are a ton of toxic relationships. And I wish we could, as a society, understand what a toxic relationship actually looks like. People aren't toxic. Generally, people aren't toxic. We throw narcissist around like it's going out of style. Narcissists are not like candy.
Popular.
We all have narcissistic tendencies. Not everybody's a narcissist. I actually find that most people who are further into a narcissistic tendency will call other people out for being narcissist, which is quite entertaining. I've talked to psychologists and going on a narcissist rant. I've talked to psychologists and psychiatrists who've done extensive research on narcissism, and it is absolutely and utterly rare to be diagnosed as a true narcissist. I have a family member who I am utterly convinced is an actual true narcissist. And it's not just because I don't like them, not just because they're toxic to me, but just the way they are. And you're right, society does that all the time. The cancel culture, like why can't we just agree to disagree? Why can't we and I love how you worded it. Everybody is doing the best they can with the knowledge that they have at that moment. People are like, oh, I made a mistake or I regret this. I'm like, why? You did the best that you can with the knowledge.
100% agree. I don't carry regret like that. And I know I've changed my views and opinions on things a lot. And I have one family member in particular that all he wants so desperately is for me to just say, I was wrong, or I was an idiot, or I can't believe I believe that. And I won't do it. I will not talk about myself that way because you know what? I was doing the best I could with the skills and resources available to me. That's what I thought was best at the time. And if I believe that about myself, I can believe that about other people. But if I don't believe that about myself, how can I possibly extend that kind of compassion and understanding to others if I hate myself? And
Yeah.
so it was really important for me to build that for myself first. I'm interested in talking more about what do toxic relationships look like and how, because I think there are people listening that are like, okay, great, sure, I could be a little more introspective and take a little bit more ownership and accountability, but I do want to recognize that sometimes it is important to create distance and separate yourself from people, and it's okay to prioritize your own health and your own wellness and not let other people steal that from you.
Absolutely. Before you get into that, though, I want to comment on your one family member there.
Mm,
Um, it is important for us to take accountability for our own actions,
yeah.
right? And one of the things that people forget to do is I might not intentionally mean to hurt somebody's feelings with my actions, right? So we're talking about toxic relationships. If I say something that hurts
Mm,
your feelings, if you bring that to my attention and say, you know what, yes, okay, I was doing the best that I had with the knowledge that I had at that time. But if my actions, words, or beliefs hurt your feelings, that was
mm,
unintentional. And I take ownership of that, right? If one of my kids or my husband comes up and says, Melissa, that comment really hurt me,
mm,
I'll be like, you know what? I'm sorry that my comment made you feel that way. That was not my intention. And I'll try not to do that again in the future, right? But acknowledging that, sometimes even without the intentions, your words do hurt.
it wasn't that I hurt him. It was that he wants what I believed. The opinions I had nothing to do with him. He just thought they were stupid.
Oh
So
yeah.
in that particular example, he just wants me to own that I believed something that was wrong. It actually had nothing to do with him. But I agree with you. I just wanted to clarify.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely,
no.
absolutely. If someone is harmed by my act, when I left the church and I realized that how much I had harmed people, I absolutely went back and did repairing and like 100%. Like that absolutely has to, even though I was doing the best I could in that system, that religious system, doesn't matter. I still harmed people and had to make amends for that.
Yeah.
But when it has nothing to do with the other person, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm less hesitant to like talk negatively about my personal like beliefs. I don't have to apologize to you for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you wanted to move on to what does a toxic relationship actually look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a family member that I am currently not in relationship with, and um it it took a while to get there, and I don't think that it's forever. And so the first thing I want to say is that sometimes there is this mentality that when you cut someone off or you end ties, it's forever. And it doesn't have to be. You have the right to say, just in this season, right? And so in my particular experience, it was building my business. Like I was focusing on my mental health. I had had a lot of trauma recently, and I could not allow this person to have her negative toxic energy in my space because I wanted to be well, and I wanted to be well for the clients that I was doing like healing work with. But that doesn't mean that I will never speak to her again, right? Or never have a relationship with her again. And so I want to make sure people give themselves a little bit of grace for like, it's okay to just say right now because I'm having a hard time or I'm prioritizing something else that's important to me. The main things that led to me recognizing that I needed to end this particular relationship with, I hadn't spoken to this person in a while, and we had contact over something. And these are the things that I notice. I talk a lot about embodiment and learning to listen to what our body is telling us and the signs. And so when I had contact with this person, several things happened. For me, anxiety presents with heart palpitations. And so I started having heart palpitations. I didn't sleep all night. Excuse me. My mind was constantly racing. Like I was defensive and I was angry to a level that I do not normally get to. And so I was acting I felt out of control, and I was acting out of character, even in my own mind and my body, right? And so this person was taking so much of my own energy. Like I was giving away my power to this person, allowing a very brief interaction. I think it was helpful for me that we had this space of not speaking, and I was able to recognize so quickly. Sometimes when you're in it, it might be a little bit more difficult because your nervous system is already just heightened all the time. But I listened to what my body was saying, and I recognized these signs, and I said, I don't want to feel this way. The other piece that was really important for me to identify was there was not space for me in that relationship. So back to what we talked about in the beginning, when I feel hurt by this person or I want to set a boundary, she is not capable of having that conversation with me. And there is not space for me to say how I feel. And so if I don't feel that I have space in a relationship, how is that healthy, or how is that bringing goodness into? And it's a little nuanced when this is an immediate family member. It's a little bit, it's hard. But when there is no room for me to advocate for myself as I get older and do the work and grow more confident in who I am, that's a little harder for me to swallow, right? There's not a mutual respect, and I can't set boundaries. And every relationship needs boundaries. And so the inability to do that and how it felt in my body, and I chose to prioritize my own wellness in the season of life that I was in. And all of those things combined were what led me to make that decision.
Yeah. My entire maternal side of my family refuses to talk to me. And a lot of that comes down to my mother. And while, I can hold gratitude for her for birthing me, I can hold gratitude for her for, giving me a semi-stable environment for a majority of my life. Um, her behavior her behavior towards me was toxic. It was, she never took responsibility for anything. She was never at fault. She was either a victim or a savior. And this is why I say I believe my mother is a true narcissist, as defined as, the 1%. And shortly after I cut ties with her, her behavior and her words created the rest of my family to cut ties with me without any communication, without any understanding, without any prior knowledge. It was completely and utterly cut ties. Wow. Now that is a toxic relationship. And the signs are, and like you said, and I love that you put that out there, is feeling into your body, right? If you are going into a relationship or going into communication with somebody, whether this is a work relationship, family relationship, friendship, whatever space you are holding for this person, if you are feeling anxious going into that, if you are feeling panic, if you are feeling irritation, anger, if you are feeling very heavy emotions, I don't like saying negative emotions anymore. I'm starting to call them heavy emotions. If you're feeling heavy emotions in your body every time that you are going to be interacting or even potentially interacting with this person, then that is a toxic relationship. Now, whether or not you end that relationship is different. And like Melissa said earlier, it's whether or not you can have that conversation. That 7 ways you may be, damaging your relationships. That guide talks about, holding yourself accountable, knowing what it means to really listen, having healthy communication, and being able to express yourself without putting that on somebody else's shoulders, right? I'm feeling. And that's one of that's holding yourself accountable. If you, like I said, if you go into that relationship or potential and go, I'm feeling really uncomfortable then you need to ask yourself why. Why are you feeling uncomfortable? What's going on?
Mhm. Yeah, I really like what you said about your mom not apologizing or owning her own mistakes. I have a family member where that's the case, and I've been thinking a lot about why I hold that person at a distance. And I haven't cut them off and I don't plan to end that relationship, but I think why there's more distance with that person than other people in my family is exactly that, the lack of ownership and owning their own harm and mistakes. And I think why that's important is when there's disruption in a relationship, there needs to be repair. And if there's no repair, then the distance becomes further. And what starts to grow? Bitterness, resentment. There's no trust there, right? You're not going to be vulnerable and open, and there's going to be less and less connection between you and that other person. And I do think that is important to have, particularly in relationships where you're very close or you're spending a lot of time and there's just kind of a deeper level to the relationship. It's hard for me to imagine a healthy, thriving relationship without that, where people are kind of able to own their own stuff.
Yeah. And that's why I say the 1% narcissist,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
in 60 plus years, nothing's ever been her fault.
Yeah.
And truly doesn't see an issue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where it is, right? You can have people where like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, or hey, I did this, and I, I'm sorry about that. I recently heard a story where there was one person who was being treated very badly by another, um, and it was coming close to damaging the relationship between the two main players of the story that I'm telling. And I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but it does speak towards this. And this being an actual toxic relationship is for the start of so there's the main relationship, the main two players. And this player brought in another. This one being rude to this one, hurting this one,
Interesting.
right?
Interesting.
When this one brought it to the other one's attention that there was damage being caused, this one decided, oh, I love you, to the other one, to the new introduction. So when it, that's a
Now
toxic
you've created
behavior.
a layer. You've created a layer. You've added bricks to the wall. That's what's happening there, right? Is like, okay, it's not that you can't get over that and still continue the relationship when that happens, but it creates like an energetic block there in the relationship.
And like I said, I'm gonna backtrack for a second and talk about my family again. I love my family. Absolutely love my family. I might not be there all the time. I might not be, I am very
Same.
stingy with my time. I'm not gonna lie. My time and my attention are very stingy these days. But I have family members who have no idea who I am, no idea who I've become, no idea the type of relationship they're missing out on because they're choosing to be sheep. And that I will call people out on that. There are society now are teaching people how to be sheep, how to not engage in their own mind, not engage in their own processes, to the cancel culture. I've experienced cancel culture firsthand because of one person's words. One person created an entire family to cancel me because of one person's word. They couldn't go off their own. They couldn't make their own decisions. When I'm not the greatest person. Absolutely, I'm not. I'm human.
Yeah.
But I had bent over backwards for a lot of people in that family, mentally, emotionally, financially, time. And not a single one of them would give me the time of day or the respect to say, what is going on? You mean something to me. Instead, they walked away.
Yeah.
My aunt actually called me a self-entitled little bitch. Yeah, so needless to
And
say, it's great.
and the real work there is being able to experience that and go through that level of hurt and grief over that loss and anger for the injustice, and to still believe the good in people, right? And still being able to say, like, see, it's even hard for me to say everyone's doing the best they can. It's really easy to say it. It's really hard to say it when you're experiencing that level of hurt and harm. And, I would love to just say to anyone who's listening, it's really easy for us to sit here and talk about this is how I recognize it and separate yourself and cut them off. It's incredibly difficult to do that, especially when it's immediate family. And in your case, it was kind of done for you, it sounds like, a little bit, but it is not black and white, right? And I'm still learning it. And you get to make mistakes and you get to make decisions that feel right for you in the time. And you get to continue to do your own work and set your own boundaries that feel right for you. And to not feel shame for staying in relationships that are toxic longer than you wish that you had. Okay, you were figuring it out. Like, how do how you don't know until you know, and you don't know until you learn. And a lot of us learn by experience, and it's incredibly nuanced and not always black and white. But I've given myself permission as I get older to prioritize myself, again, not in a way that hurts people, but I can't be responsible for their emotions or their feelings or their reactions. They have to do their own work, and I personally choose to try to have a loving, compassionate mentality towards even the people or systems that hurt me. But that's hard.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And let's segue that into what are healthy relationships.
Yeah.
I don't believe that anybody is truly capable of having perfect relationships. Perfection is a myth. Please
I
understand
agree.
that that is my belief, that perfection is a myth. No relationship is going to be perfect. We are human. We are human. Um, but a healthy relationship starts with you. A healthy
Yes.
relationship always starts with you. You cannot
Yes.
create a healthy relationship by expecting or requiring other people to change to suit you. That is toxic. That is a toxic
Yes.
behavior. I once told my husband that I can't expect you to change for me. I can't ask you to, I can't expect you to. But you can't expect me to stay, right?
Mm.
I guess I'm still married. I'm not wearing my rings, but I'm still married.
Mm. Mm.
So, but that's healthy communication. Healthy relationships start
Interesting.
with owning and taking accountability and
Yes.
responsibility for your own actions, your own thoughts and beliefs. That's why the 7 ways you may be damaging your relationship is key, because it starts with you. Then you start putting that out there. Hey, I don't like this. My husband knows not to he can call me whatever name he wants under the sun, as long as we're joking. If he
Mm.
calls me a name out of anger, then I'm going to react in anger. But it's healthy communication. It's, hey, that triggered me. I don't like that. Can we figure out a way where you can still express yourself and be yourself, but still respect me at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. And are you able to have that level of conversation in your relationships, like we talked about earlier, right? Is this someone who creates and allows space for your feelings, your emotions, your needs? Is it equitable? For me, as I get older, equity is so important. Like, I want to feel that there's equal effort put in, that there's equal sharing put in, and that there's equal just ability to respect and meet each other's needs and desires. And being able to have those conversations is really like necessary for me. And it doesn't mean you're having them every week with your best girlfriends. Let's have our weekly check-in. Not necessarily. But if you feel like there's something that is on your heart and your mind, I think a healthy, thriving relationship allows for that level of communication and all the things we talked about. Do both parties apologize and own when they've messed up? Because they will. You will. You're human. You will make mistakes and you will hurt people. Can you apologize? Can you repair? I think something else that's important is, are there expectations? Are there clear expectations? Like, is the person you're in a relationship, do they know what your expectations are, and do you know what their expectations are? Because what happens when that's not clear is then you or the other party end up feeling hurt because, well, they didn't do that for me, or this didn't happen. Did they know that you wanted them to do that? Right? And so sometimes there can be this build up, right, between you and this other person where you're feeling frustrated or hurt or angry because it was never said, right? It was never clearly said what that expectation was. And that's really hard. I think, especially as women, we're starting to talk about that more, what it looks like to ask for what you want or say what you need. And again, that's really challenging, but without clear expectations, I think it very easily leads to a lot of bitterness and resentment that can cause issues in relationships.
I agree. But I do want to stress that there's a difference. You can have expectations or things that you need or whatever way, but you cannot put those expectations on other people. So a scenario that I like to say, if I'm moving, or if my friend is moving and they say, hey, Melissa, I need your help. If I have the ability to go and help them, right, I will. Absolutely. Right. I will jump and come and help you. But if they don't do the same for me, I can't expect them to do it just because it's something that I would do. Right.
Sure.
So understanding that expectations is actually one of the leading causes to relationship failures in all aspects.
Yeah.
Because we expect something. With expectations, just communication, right? Just communication. You can't expect somebody else to know what you need if you don't communicate it, right? And if they consistently don't follow through, or consistently, if they say, hey, yeah, I'm going to try to do that, and don't try at all, then that's probably toxic behavior right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that point. I guess why I do think expectations are important is because, I mean, I think it's different for family and friends and romantic. Like, I think that there are different levels. I guess why I think it's important to talk about expectations in the context of healthy relationships is, and yeah, it can be more to do with you than that other person.
Do you think it would be more so boundaries than expectations?
I guess why I'm stuck on expectations is because I think that's, like you said, I think that's where a lot of like resentment and bitterness comes from. And maybe it's more of that you need to do the work to fully look in the mirror about what your expectations are. Mm-hmm. And are they reasonable, and should they be applied to this relationship? And if they are, well, if this person can't meet them and it's necessary that that person meets them, then I need to step away because that's creating toxicity. So I think it's both, to answer your question, but I guess I'm still talking about expectations because I think my guess is we're not totally honest with ourselves about our expectations. So maybe it's not that you're constantly talking about expectations with that person, but with yourself or with your therapist or with your healer, and that there's a little more honesty about it. Why do I expect that from that person? Why does it hurt me when that person doesn't meet that expectation? Oh, maybe because in my childhood, yada, yada, right? And that there's just a little bit more honesty about it.
Yeah. And in that situation, you would not, right? If it's an expectation that you have because something happened, right? That's like having a toxic domestic violent relationship, right? And then going into your next one and saying you can't do this because this person did it and then it led to this, right? Even though that person may not be doing it for the same reason or the same whatever, right? It was just one of those things. So yeah, expectations and boundaries are definitely huge. But I would be cautious on the expectations. Yes, you have needs. Yes, you have boundaries. But expectations, again, are your own, right? It's I expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about your example of the friends and moving. And so I'm thinking, I still see expectations there because I would think, well, I would think in order for that relationship to be successful, where one person helps and the other doesn't, and maybe we're talking about the same thing where maybe you're using boundaries and I'm using expectations. For me, in order for that relationship to sustain, it would need to be clearly understood and accepted that someone's not always going to say yes to helping or have different involvement
Different
when friends
ways,
need
though.
help.
So let's talk romance for a second, as an example. I am, so if anybody knows what the 5 love languages are, mine is affection and attention. I like mine's physical touch and affection. And does my husband provide that to me all the time? No, he does not. Now I could expect that, hey, this is my love language. I expect you to provide me with that love language. Now, that has, at the early stages of our relationship, caused issue until I realized that that was my expectation, and not a boundary, not something that I absolutely needed. It was my expectation. I now vocalize, hey, I'm feeling a little bit neglected here. Can we set aside some time to snuggle or watch a movie or whatever, right? But looking at my husband, and if we take physical affection, right, my expectation, my need, something that I do for him and need back, because we always do for people what we would like done for ourselves, right? He makes sure that my car is working at all times. He makes sure that there are things around the house that I don't ever have to do. His love language is gifts of service or acts of service, right? So looking at him, I can expect that he will love me or provide for me the way that I will for him. That causes issues. But if I look internally and say, okay, that is my expectation, how is he showing me that he loves me in his way, right? And in his way, he's showing me love by doing things for me that I then don't have to do, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I said expectations are a killer, because if I expect my friend to move me and they don't because they're not comfortable with that, maybe they physically can't, but they provide for me or give to me in different ways, right? That's one of the it's a human characteristic to have expectations. But at the same time, we do put those on other people when we shouldn't be. And that's where I was going with the expectations and boundaries, because probably about 75% of relationship breakdowns are caused by expectation.
Yeah.
Right? And the miscommunication of, you don't care for me because you're not giving me what I want. And that's where that comes in.
So, but do you expect, maybe I should use a different word, is it important to you to have, what I'm hearing you describe is equity in your relationships, right? So
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
though you might help a friend move, they might not help you move, but they serve you in other ways. Same
Exactly.
with your romantic partner.
Yeah.
I would argue that's an expectation. I would argue that you do expect a certain level of reciprocal help and service in your relationships, and that you are health emotionally mature enough to recognize it might not be exactly in the way that you initially want / need. And so you can appreciate the other ways in which people kind of help you back. But there is an expectation in your relationships that it goes both ways. Or would you not call that expectation?
I wouldn't call it an expectation. I would call
Okay.
that a relationship, right? A
Okay.
relationship can't be a relationship without, that three-way street. Every relationship is a
Yeah.
three-way street. What? My way, your way, and then the relationship itself, right? It's like having a joint bank account. You have each your own bank account, and I'm not talking just romantic here. Even a co-working relationship, right? You have your needs, my needs, and then what we each put into the middle, right? And then we take out of the
Yeah.
middle whatever we need to sustain the relationship, right? You can't have a relationship if people aren't, right? A toxic relationship is 100% one person. That's a toxic relationship, right? So you can't have a healthy relationship without having give and take in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I think we're mostly talking about the
Yeah.
same thing, but
worded differently.
I think so. And I also think it's different for every person, and it changes depending on your maturity level and your experience in that particular relationship. And I think, again, to talk about everyone's doing the best they can, maybe you can look at yourself and be like, wow, when I was younger, I had a lot of expectations for people. Yeah, well, that's where you were at. You needed to feel more safe and secure, and your body was doing the best she could to feel safe and grounded. And now, and so again, not beating ourselves up and recognizing that there is really wise behavior and reasons that we build these kinds of coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms. And as we grow older and mature and do that inner work, we get to kind of shed some of those layers and say, okay, thank you for helping me. I get to set you aside, and we're going to do things a little bit differently.
I wrote a book about that.
Oh, cool. That's
This is
awesome.
all my past romantic relationships,
Yeah.
how each one of them, even though they failed, how each one of them prepared me for my marriage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They each taught me something different. And sometimes I was an a-hole, sometimes they were an a-hole.
Yeah.
But each one had a valuable lesson that I needed to learn to be the best possible version of myself I could be in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and I would say that the same is true for me. I'm really passionate about bringing a little bit more of unity and peace to our world. And if it wasn't for my experience and what I would describe as a harmful religious system, I wouldn't understand how religious people think and operate. So I live in America where half, I don't know what the stats are, of us are evangelical Christians, right? And so I now, even though that relationship harmed me in a lot of ways, I can say I know exactly why they think that way, why they do what they do. And so I can speak in a way that is empathetic and understanding and compassionate, even though I choose a different way and a different path. And so to your point, I am grateful for all of the ways that my past experiences have taught me, and I get to choose something different.
Yep. This world needs to stop judging, ridiculing,
Yeah.
shaming, and rejecting people because their beliefs
They
are
think
different than
differently.
ours.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. That's one of the reasons I started this show, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to share. We can have different opinions. We can be
Yes.
saying the same thing in different ways, like Melissa and I were today.
Yes.
And it's okay.
And we still learn from each other and stayed in
Yes.
relationship and stayed regulated and asked questions and listened and learned. And that is what we need more of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything you'd like to add before we get going?
No, I'm just grateful for this conversation. Listeners, watchers, have compassion for yourselves and for others, and we're all doing the best we can. I really believe that.
And on that note, remember that if you're in a toxic relationship and you're having trouble getting out, it is okay to be wherever it is that you're at.
Yep.
Know that you are not alone. You are not meant to stay in that space for longer than you need to learn. And that's what these moments are. They're learning moments. They help you be the best possible version of yourself that they can. You're supposed to learn and grow. So experience everything, learn and grow from them, and eventually find your way out of those toxic relationships. All right. Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining me today.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thank you.
Me too. All right. If anybody would like to connect with either myself or Melissa, and I know so confusing Melissa's, make sure that you go and check the links in the description of this episode. You can find Melissa. I know that we did link a bunch of her stuff in the description of this episode. So go and take a look at her and, find out what she's got to offer you. Our sponsor today is Phoenix Identity, which just happens to be one of my businesses. Go and check that out. They are offering you the 7 ways you may be damaging your relationships. This is a must-have guide to start taking accountability for yourself, having healthy communication, and learning how to have healthy relationships. Go and check that out. Link in the description. If you would like to be a guest speaker, a guest blogger, or if you'd like to see a topic featured on the show, please reach out to us at justalivetv.com. Like, follow, and share the show, and have a wonderful afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on when or where you're watching. And I'll see all of you on the next episode. Bye.